June 17, 2024. A federal courtroom in Northern California falls silent as the judge delivers 2 life sentences without parole. The defendants, hardened men with death's head patches sewn into their very souls, show no emotion as their world crumbles around them. For the Hells Angels, this moment represents something far worse than prison time. It's the unthinkable. Their fortress of silence has been breached. Jonathan John Nelson and Russell Ott, senior members of the Sonoma County chapter, had just become the latest casualties in a war that's raged for over 7 decades. A war between the FBI and an organization that doesn't just wear its loyalty, it bleeds for it. This isn't the story of motorcycle enthusiasts gone wrong. This is the anatomy of America's most wanted criminal empire, built on a foundation of violence, secrecy, and a code that considers death before dishonor. Today we're pulling back the curtain on how federal agents infiltrated an organization designed to keep them out, and why every victory against the Angels only seems to make them more dangerous. The Death's Head patch isn't just a symbol, it's a warning. And for the FBI, it's been a declaration of war that shows no signs of ending. Birth of an Empire, California, 1948. World War II veterans return home carrying more than just memories. They bring skills in combat, brotherhood, and a hunger for the adrenaline that civilian life can't provide. In the dusty towns outside San Francisco, a motorcycle club emerges that will reshape the criminal underworld forever. The Hells Angels didn't start as criminals. They started as brothers, men bound by shared trauma, shared rebellion, and a shared rejection of society's rules. But somewhere between the freedom of the open road and the structured violence of military training, they discovered something intoxicating: power. By the 1960s, the transformation was complete. What began as weekend rides had evolved into something federal agents would later describe as a transnational criminal organization. The Death's Head skull, borrowed from military insignia, became their calling card. The 3-piece patch system marked rank and territory. Most importantly, the code of silence became their religion. This wasn't just about motorcycles anymore. It was about creating an alternative society with its own laws, its own justice system, and its own methods of enforcement. Members weren't just joining a club. They were pledging allegiance to a criminal enterprise that would demand everything from them, including their lives. The FBI took notice early, but they underestimated what they were facing. This wasn't a gang that could be dismantled with a few arrests. This was something entirely new, a sophisticated organization that combined military discipline with criminal ambition, wrapped in the mythology of outlaw rebellion. Spreading like wildfire. The Angels didn't expand, they conquered. Chapter by chapter, state by state, they absorbed smaller clubs through a process they called patching over. It sounds peaceful, it wasn't. When the Hells Angels arrived in a new territory, existing motorcycle clubs faced a choice: join or disappear. Those who resisted often found themselves outnumbered, outgunned, and overwhelmed by an organization that had perfected violence as both an art and a science. By 1961, they had jumped continents, establishing their first international chapter in Auckland, New Zealand. Europe followed, then Australia. Each expansion followed the same pattern: identify profitable criminal markets, establish local partnerships, and systematically eliminate competition. But this wasn't random growth. Federal intelligence analysts began noticing patterns that chilled them to the bone. New chapters appeared along major drug trafficking routes. Port cities became strongholds. Border regions turned into operational headquarters. The Hells Angels weren't just spreading. They were building infrastructure for a criminal empire that spanned the globe. In the 1980s, the true scope became clear. European chapters were moving ecstasy and cocaine. Australian chapters controlled methamphetamine distribution. Canadian chapters served as bridges between American operations and international suppliers. What law enforcement faced wasn't just a motorcycle club. It was a multinational corporation built on violence and fear. The most terrifying realization came when agents began mapping communication patterns between chapters. Despite being separated by thousands of miles and different legal systems, they operated with seamless coordination. A drug seizure in California could be replaced by a shipment from the Netherlands within weeks. An arrested member in one country could find sanctuary in another. They had built something unprecedented, a criminal organization that transcended borders and operated beyond the reach of any single law enforcement agency. The federal war machine destroying the Hells Angels required more than ordinary police work. It demanded a complete reimagining of how law enforcement approached organized crime. The FBI's answer came in the form of two weapons that would reshape criminal prosecution forever: RICO and VICAR. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act became their sword. Under RICO, prosecutors didn't need to prove every member committed every crime. They only needed to prove the organization existed to commit crimes, and that individual members furthered that purpose. Suddenly, a drug deal in California could be connected to a murder in Nevada, all under the umbrella of enterprise activity. Violent crimes in aid of racketeering became their hammer. VICAR allowed federal prosecutors to seek life sentences for violence committed to maintain or advance position within a criminal organization. A bar fight between rival bikers was no longer just assault. It was enterprise enforcement that carried federal penalties. But statutes alone couldn't penetrate the Angels' fortress of silence. The FBI needed intelligence, and getting it required tactics that pushed the boundaries of undercover work. Multi-agency task forces brought together the DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and local police in coordinated campaigns that could last for years. The strategy was surgical. Rather than mass arrests that would scatter the organization, federal agents built cases like architects, laying foundation evidence before adding each floor of criminal activity. Phone taps captured planning conversations. Surveillance cameras documented drug transactions. Financial investigations revealed money laundering operations. Each piece of evidence was designed to prove not just individual guilt, but organizational purpose. When federal indictments finally dropped, they weren't targeting random criminals. They were systematically dismantling the command structure of chapters, removing leaders and operational specialists in coordinated strikes designed to cripple the Angels' ability to function as a unified enterprise. Blood in the clubhouse. The murder of Joel Silva revealed the Hells Angels' darkest secret: their willingness to execute their own members to maintain discipline. Silva, a full-patch member of the Fresno chapter, made a fatal mistake. He crossed the wrong people at the wrong time, and the Sonoma County leadership decided he had to die. The execution was planned with military precision. Silva was summoned to the Fresno clubhouse under the pretense of a routine meeting. He entered trusting his brothers, believing in the bonds that supposedly protected all members. Instead, he walked into a trap that would expose the true nature of Angels' brotherhood. A single shot to the back of the head ended Silva's life. But what followed revealed the organization's sophisticated approach to covering up violence. His body was transported to a crematorium in Fresno County, where it was illegally incinerated to destroy forensic evidence. The murder scene was sanitized. Witnesses were intimidated. Evidence was destroyed. For federal investigators, Silva's murder became the key that unlocked years of surveillance and intelligence gathering. The killing wasn't personal, it was business. The kind of business that demonstrated how the Hells Angels maintained control through fear, even among their own members. The FBI had been watching the Sonoma County chapter for years, building a network of informants and accumulating evidence of drug trafficking, weapons violations, and violent intimidation. But Silva's murder provided something prosecutors desperately needed: proof that violence wasn't just tolerated within the organization, it was required. Phone records placed key suspects at the scene. Surveillance footage tracked their movements before and after the killing. Witness testimony, extracted through years of patient investigation work, revealed the planning and execution in chilling detail. Most importantly, cooperating witnesses explained why Silva had to die, to send a message that disobedience within the organization would be met with ultimate punishment. When silence breaks, building a RICO case against the Hells Angels required something that seemed impossible: getting members to betray their sacred code of silence. For decades, that code had protected the organization better than any lawyer or legal technicality. Members would rather serve life sentences than cooperate with federal agents. But the Silva murder case revealed cracks in that armor. The FBI's patient approach, years of surveillance, financial pressure, and strategic arrests began yielding results. Some members, facing life sentences themselves, made the calculation that survival meant cooperation. The breakthrough came through a combination of leverage and fear. Federal prosecutors didn't just threaten prison time. They threatened to seize everything: homes, motorcycles, bank accounts, businesses. They demonstrated that loyalty to the Angels would cost defendants everything they had built outside the organization. Cooperating witnesses provided devastating testimony about the Angels' internal operations. They explained the hierarchy, the decision-making process, and the enforcement mechanisms that kept members in line. They revealed how drug trafficking funded the organization and how violence protected those operations. Most critically, they testified about the Silva murder not as an isolated incident, but as standard operating procedure. They explained how the killing was discussed, planned, and executed as an organizational decision. They connected individual actions to enterprise goals, providing prosecutors with the enterprise-level evidence needed to sustain RICO convictions. The testimony painted a picture of an organization where violence wasn't aberrant behavior, it was policy. Where loyalty wasn't earned through brotherhood, it was enforced through fear. Where the death's head patch wasn't just symbolism, it was a promise of what happened to those who crossed the line. Digital footprints in a connected world. The Hells Angels built their empire in an analog world, but by 2020, even the most paranoid criminal organizations couldn't escape the digital age. Federal investigators exploited that reality with devastating effectiveness in the Sonoma County case. Cell phone records became treasure maps, revealing not just communications, but precise locations during critical time frames. GPS data tracked vehicles and suspects to and from crime scenes. Surveillance cameras, both government and private, captured movements that suspects thought were invisible. Digital evidence proved particularly damaging because it was objective. Defense attorneys could attack witness credibility, but they couldn't argue with phone records that placed defendants at specific locations during specific times. They couldn't dispute surveillance footage that showed their clients engaging in criminal activity. Social media provided unexpected intelligence. Angels members, despite their paranoia about law enforcement, couldn't resist documenting their lifestyle online. Photos revealed organizational structure, relationships between members, and even criminal activity. Posts and comments sometimes contradicted sworn testimony, providing prosecutors with impeachment material. Financial records stored in digital formats revealed money laundering operations and unexplained wealth. Bank transfers, credit card purchases, and cryptocurrency transactions painted a picture of criminal proceeds flowing through legitimate financial systems. The combination of traditional investigative techniques with modern digital surveillance created an overwhelming evidentiary foundation. By the time federal prosecutors presented their case against the Sonoma County chapter, they had built a comprehensive digital archive that documented the organization's criminal activity in unprecedented detail. Operation Black Biscuit. When infiltration goes wrong. The most ambitious and dangerous attempt to penetrate the Hells Angels came through Operation Black Biscuit, an ATF infiltration that revealed both the possibilities and perils of undercover work against the organization. For 21 months, ATF agents posed as members of the rival Mongols Motorcycle Club, attending events and building relationships with Arizona Hells Angels. The operation provided unprecedented access to the organization's inner workings, revealing criminal activity that ranged from drug trafficking to weapons dealing to violent enforcement. But Black Biscuit also demonstrated why infiltrating the Angels was so treacherous. The operation required agents to participate in or witness criminal activity to maintain their cover. Legal challenges emerged around entrapment, evidence contamination, and the ethical boundaries of undercover work. Several cases collapsed before trial due to evidentiary issues and defense challenges. The operation revealed criminal activity, but struggled to convert that intelligence into sustainable prosecutions. Most critically, it showed how the Angels' counter-surveillance culture could detect and neutralize infiltration attempts. For federal agencies, Black Biscuit became both a cautionary tale and a learning experience. It proved that the Angels could be penetrated, but only at enormous cost and risk. Future operations would rely more heavily on electronic surveillance, financial investigation, and cooperative witnesses rather than deep undercover work. The legacy of Black Biscuit influenced how federal agencies approach subsequent Angels investigations. Rather than relying on single undercover agents, they developed multi-pronged strategies that combined human intelligence with digital surveillance and financial analysis, approaches that proved far more sustainable in court. The enterprise unveiled. Federal prosecutors in the Sonoma County case faced a fundamental challenge, proving that the Hells Angels operated as a criminal enterprise rather than just a collection of individual criminals who happened to ride motorcycles together. The evidence they presented was overwhelming. Drug trafficking wasn't random individual activity. It was coordinated through chapter leadership and used established distribution networks. Violence wasn't personal disputes, it was organizational enforcement that served enterprise goals. Financial activity wasn't individual profit-seeking. It was systematic money laundering that protected organizational assets. Prosecutors showed jurors the Angels' rigid hierarchy, from prospects to full-patch members to chapter officers. They explained how the three-piece patch system indicated rank and authority within the organization. They demonstrated how chapter meetings were used to coordinate criminal activity and resolve internal disputes. Most critically, they connected the Silva murder to this organizational structure. The killing wasn't a rogue action by individual members. It was an organizational decision made by chapter leadership to maintain discipline and send a message to other members. Financial evidence revealed how the organization generated and laundered criminal proceeds. Bank records showed unexplained wealth flowing to members engaged in drug trafficking. Asset seizures revealed expensive motorcycles, vehicles, and property purchased with criminal proceeds. The cumulative evidence painted a picture of an organization that existed primarily to commit crimes and protect its members from law enforcement consequences. The motorcycle club aspects were genuine, but secondary to the criminal enterprise that generated wealth and power for its leadership. Life without parole. June 17, 2024, marked a watershed moment in federal prosecution of the Hells Angels, when U.S. District Judge sentenced Jonathan John Nelson and Russell Ott to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. It sent shockwaves through outlaw motorcycle culture. The sentences reflected both the severity of their crimes and their roles within the enterprise. Under Vicar statutes, murder committed to maintain or advance position in a racketeering organization carries mandatory life imprisonment. But these weren't just individual sentences. They were strategic strikes designed to cripple the Sonoma County chapter's operational capability. Federal judges emphasized deterrence in their sentencing remarks, noting that harsh penalties were necessary to send messages to other outlaw motorcycle organizations. The Angels' culture of violence and intimidation required correspondingly severe legal consequences to achieve any deterrent effect. Prosecutors highlighted years of obstruction that followed the Silva murder, including systematic intimidation of potential witnesses and attempts to conceal evidence. The organization's efforts to protect its members from legal consequences demonstrated the enterprise-level coordination that RICO statutes were designed to target. The life sentences marked one of the most significant federal victories against a Hells Angels chapter in over a decade. Unlike previous cases that resulted in lengthy but finite prison terms, these convictions permanently removed chapter leadership from the organization and sent unmistakable signals about federal commitment to dismantling the Angels' criminal operations. Surviving the storm. Despite decades of federal pressure and high-profile convictions, the Hells Angels have demonstrated remarkable resilience through organizational adaptation and geographic diversification. Their decentralized chapter structure provides natural protection against law enforcement successes. Each charter operates with significant autonomy while maintaining loyalty to overall organizational principles. When one chapter is compromised, others continue functioning with minimal disruption. Recruitment and vetting processes have evolved to counter law enforcement infiltration attempts. Prospects undergo extensive background checks and lengthy probationary periods designed to identify potential informants or undercover agents. The organization's culture of paranoia, while sometimes counterproductive, provides genuine security benefits. International expansion offers additional protection through jurisdictional complexity. Members facing pressure in one country can relocate to chapters in more permissive jurisdictions. Criminal operations can shift between countries based on law enforcement activity and legal vulnerabilities. The Angels have also adapted their operational security to modern surveillance capabilities. Traditional communications methods have given way to encrypted platforms and counter-surveillance techniques designed to frustrate electronic monitoring. Clubhouses and meeting locations are regularly changed to prevent long-term surveillance operations. Most critically, the organization's cultural foundation, built on loyalty, brotherhood, and resistance to authority, continues attracting new members despite legal risks. Each federal prosecution that removes leadership creates opportunities for ambitious members to advance within the hierarchy, ensuring organizational continuity. The modern battlefield, federal law enforcement's approach to the Hells Angels has evolved significantly since the Sonoma County prosecutions, incorporating lessons learned from decades of investigation and prosecution experience. Digital evidence has become central to modern cases, with federal agents exploiting the organization's inability to completely escape electronic surveillance. Cell phone records, GPS data, financial transactions, and social media activity provide objective evidence that supplements traditional witness testimony. International cooperation has expanded dramatically, with real-time intelligence sharing between American agencies and foreign counterparts. The Angels' transnational operations now face coordinated responses from law enforcement agencies that communicate and coordinate across borders. Technology integration has transformed surveillance capabilities. Agencies can now track financial transactions, monitor communications, and document criminal activity with precision that would have been impossible during earlier investigations. The organization's historical advantages in operational security have been significantly eroded. Public perception has shifted as well. Federal prosecutors can now present juries with comprehensive evidence of the Angels' criminal operations, overcoming romanticized images of rebellious motorcycle culture. The narrative has changed from individual bikers challenging authority to sophisticated criminal organizations threatening public safety. These developments suggest that while the Hells Angels remain formidable, the legal and investigative environment has become increasingly hostile to their operations. High-profile convictions like those in Northern California represent not isolated victories, but systematic progress in a long-term campaign. The Eternal War. 77 years after their formation in post-war California, the Hells Angels remain locked in an existential struggle with federal law enforcement. Each conviction removes experienced operators, but creates opportunities for advancement within the organization. Each chapter dismantled is eventually rebuilt or replaced. Each tactical victory by either side leads to strategic adaptation by the other. The June 2024 life sentences represent a significant federal victory, but they also underscore the challenge of completely dismantling an organization built to survive exactly this kind of pressure. The Angels' combination of organizational discipline, international reach, and cultural appeal ensures their continued existence regardless of legal setbacks. For federal agencies, the campaign against the Hells Angels has become a permanent fixture of organized crime enforcement. Each generation of agents learns techniques pioneered against the organization and develops new methods for penetrating their evolving security measures. The Death's Head patch continues to represent defiance against authority, brotherhood among outcasts, and profits from activities society has deemed criminal. Until that fundamental appeal disappears, the war between the FBI and the Hells Angels will continue, measured not in decisive victories, but in tactical successes that temporarily disrupt an organization designed to outlast them all. In this endless conflict, the only certainty is uncertainty. The Angels will adapt, survive, and rebuild. And federal agents will continue their patient, methodical campaign to prove that no criminal organization, no matter how disciplined, how international, or how deeply rooted in American outlaw culture, can operate beyond the reach of justice forever. The patch endures, the pursuit continues, and somewhere in America tonight, federal agents are building the cases that will define the next chapter in this never-ending war.